Real quick, before we start this podcast episode, I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Marc Colcer podcast. I know you've got a million things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this podcast episode truly means the world to me, and I just want to say thank you for that. If you'd like to continue to support the podcast, right below this video, if you could hit the subscribe button, and then, hey, if you got some more time and you want to hit the download button, the comment button, the like button, the share button, any of those buttons, it's greatly, greatly appreciated. It helps for other people to find out about the podcast, and it helps for you to be notified about future episodes. So if you guys could take a quick second, hit the subscribe button, I would really appreciate that. Outside of that, this episode and every other episode is brought to you guys by Roast Umber Coffee. As some of you guys know, I co-founded Roast Umber Coffee, and we have the greatest farmers in Guatemala and Honduras and the greatest roaster in Grand Rapids, Michigan, all to bring you guys the greatest cup of coffee possible. So if you'd like to try it out, go to our website, use the coupon code MARC30, and you're going to get 30% off your coffee. Now on to the episode. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Welcome to the Marc Colcer Podcast. But dude, how's your day going?
It's going good. Started the day at the beach. Way too much time on Twitter after that, and then not that bad of a drive down here.
There we go. But dude, you're the first one of one artist I've had on the podcast. So
I was wondering that on my drive down here because I haven't seen all of your episodes, but I was like, I feel like I would have known if like an artist got on here.
Yeah.
That's fucking cool.
I've talked to John Lay about coming on. That I'm sure he will at some point. Obviously, would love to have John on. But yeah, no, I would love to have on. I mean, I say all the time, I think the art process is like one of the most interesting things to me because I appreciate how much work goes into it. And so I would love to have more one-of-one artists on and talk about their experience and talk about, their creative process and everything like that. But you are officially, Scuba Steve is officially the first one-of-one artist on the podcast. So, Steve, for people who don't know who you are, can you give a brief intro to yourself?
Yeah, I'm Scuba. I'm an artist. I've got a background in murals, animation, illustration, and more recently, in the past couple of years, I got into the whole crypto NFT Ponzi.
There we go. So before we dive into that, I do want to just first off give a big thank you to you because for people who don't know, back in February, I posted that I wanted to raise money to provide meals for the homeless in LA on Valentine's Day. And I put it out on Twitter and I kind of thought like, okay, I'll probably raise maybe like $300. I'll round it up to 500 myself, and then I'll go and $500. I feel like I can get quite a bit of meals for the homeless people in LA, right? And I put it out on Twitter. It was just like, hey, if you want to donate, here's some, like, I created some wallets for it and, put that out. And you hit me up right away and you were like, I want to create a piece that I put out and I put out as editions and people can buy it and all of the proceeds are going to go towards the, what you're doing here. And I was like, okay, that's awesome. And I had no idea how many would sell. And then I start checking and I'm refreshing and the number's going up and I'm doing the math and I'm like, I think this is going to be like $600. And I was like, is he really giving me all of that? And then you were like, hey man, here's all of it. And it was so incredibly just powerful to see, one, people supporting your art, and then two, people supporting the cause. And it meant a lot to me how much you cared. And we ended up raising over $2,000. I think the total was like $2,300 something. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in a long time of just basically being able to, we provided meals for several different homeless encampments in LA. We provided personal supplies for them. We donated towards a children's shelter, towards a women's shelter, another homeless shelter. So we were able to do a ton, all because of so many people in the Solana space, but especially including you, because you were literally, I think, a quarter of the amount of money that was raised all came from you. So I very much appreciate it and appreciate everybody who purchased one of those editions. So I would just like to start off the podcast with a big thank you to you.
I'm going to turn that thank you right back to you, though, because that was just like a spur of the moment. I saw your tweet. I was like, Marc's a good guy. I feel like I would throw money at him like for a donation and like feel good that it's like going to go towards good shit. Well, and like when I messaged you, like hit me right back. We're like, abso-fucking-lutely. And I had some shit on hand. I was like, yeah, well, this is a little something different, but it's kind of like feels enough like me to put out there, and it worked.
Yeah, dude, that was
I was really stoked to be able to contribute to that.
Dude, that was an awesome experience, and Yeah, just it always feels good to actually see where the money goes to. I posted a lot of photos from that day,
That was
and
so cool that you were doing that.
yeah,
Like I was like following the whole day pretty much on Twitter of like every stop you were making, like you were itemizing like all the stuff you were buying. Like that was fucking amazing.
thanks, man. That was it was cool to see everybody rally together, and then just knowing that we were able to help a lot of people and stuff like that. So just goes to show once again the power of Web3 with everything we're doing. But so before Web3, so let's talk about your background and everything like that. So what was your background before getting into NFTs, crypto? What were you doing with your life? Have you been an artist full time for a long time? Kind of walk me through all of that.
So being an artist full time didn't start until 2020, and then pretty much my whole life before that was school, working in restaurants. I know you have a coffee company. I've worked as a barista for a good 5 years around here, slinging coffee, and a lot of those opportunities and just like chatting with my regulars. That's kind of what led to my opportunities that let me quit that and go full time, self employed. Then COVID hit, and that's kind of like where I started to find Web3 with, just the state of the world and just a lot of time at home and nowhere to be.
There we go. And so walk me through kind of the art part of that. So like, have you always been creating art? Like when did you start creating art?
I've been drawing as long as I can remember. Like throughout high school, I wanted to go to art school, but you get your parents saying like, no, you gotta go to college and like be able to get a job after you graduate, and art school's not really great for that. So we kind of found like a compromise major with this. It was kind of like a fluff thing. It was called media art and design. It's sort of focused on like front end web development. So like throughout college, I was like, oh, I'll go like I'm gonna make websites for a living, and like I'll still always be able to like draw and that shit on my own. Then when we got towards the end of college, I was just like absolutely fed up with my major, like sick of it. They were definitely not giving us like any of the tools or knowledge we needed to like kind of make that first step out of college into the like real world and do that for a living. So I totally pivoted like end of my junior year, started taking as many art classes as I could, which meant being like the old guy in like all the freshman art classes, which was hilarious in its own right, of like freshmen who were there like just getting outside for the first time, like no parents, they're in like party mode. And I'm like, end of my college career, I'm like, I just want to get good grades and get the fuck out of here. But I absolutely enjoyed all of those classes, and then graduated and was kind of had that moment of like, well, fuck, what now? So from there, I was in Virginia Beach at the time. They had like a little arts district kind of coming together, city funding coming in. And they put a call for artists out for the first like city funded mural project. And I was like, had some friends telling me like, oh, you need to apply for this. I was like kind of looking at it. I was like, I've never painted a mural. Like it was a fucking crosswalk, like 40 feet by however wide a crosswalk is. And like got a little liquid courage in me, kind of like went through that application, like skipped the template that they wanted you to use. I just like sent a picture of a canvas I had painted, thinking like, like got that off my plate. Like I tried. I didn't try as hard as I could, but I tried. And for whatever reason, they picked me to do it. And so that was like the first like real world paid opportunity. I was slinging cups of coffee right down the street from it at the time. Super underpaid. It was like $200 for like a fuck ton of work. But like after that first project, I was like, this is what I have to do. I can't have a real job. I need to figure out how to like keep doing this. And it just kind of turned into like following opportunities, like just being open to like pivoting and, like trying new shit, which eventually led to me moving to California, which was kind of like a big step forward, but also like 3 steps back, because it's like, okay, now I'm in a new place. I don't know anybody out here, no connections to any art scenes, but I know that I can make coffee, and that's how you meet people, because people are coming in the morning, same time every day. And I just kind of started following that.
Dude, that's literally what it's all about. Like, I feel like a lot of times people overcomplicate, things. They're like, well, I don't know how to get started. And it's like, you just got to be doing shit, right? Like
Absolutely.
you try things out, you see how it goes. Sometimes it's going to work out, sometimes it's not. But like the reality of it is the alternative is doing nothing, right? Which is never the answer, right? And so it's the same thing for me. I mean, my background's in photography, and like when I moved out to LA, I'd only been doing photography for 6 months. Like I had literally picked up a camera for 6 months. And so I was like, and I had started in that 6 months, I had started making good money in Michigan. And part of it was I was just a natural kind of like, I'm like, if I'm going to do something, I go full into it, right? So when I bought my first camera, I literally started doing shoots like that week, right? And next thing you know, I was doing like 5-6 photo shoots a week, living in, in my first 6 months of doing photography, right? Not paid, but I was just doing them, right? And then quickly it was like, hey, I'll pay you $50 for this. And I was like, all right, sure. And then my golden rule of thumb was like, once nobody says no to $50, then you charge more, right? And then you just kept going up and kept going up and kept going up. And then I was making good money, and then I moved out to LA, and I was like, okay, now I got to get started again, right? Because now I know nobody here. And so I just said to myself, hey, you got like 5 months to figure this out. If you can do it, great. Like go full time into photography, do all of that. If after like 5 months you're not making money, well, then you got to go get a job, right? And so that was kind of my attitude. But it's like, it's that whole thing of you just got to do things, and then it'll work out. If you bust your ass enough, something's gonna work out eventually, And you never know what could be your like big break or whatever for you.
So much comes down to the right place at the right time, which is actually a really funny story for like how that happened for me.
Yeah.
So I was making coffee over in Venice Beach. Wasn't getting like too many paid art projects. I had like one big show that I had on the East Coast that I like painted all out here, had to ship everything, but like really nowhere, like doing that full time and supporting myself wasn't in the question. And then I got a stalker.
Really?
took a turn right there.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
I got a stalker.
I told you not to tell the story how we met.
But it is a pretty hilarious and traumatic story all at the same time.
Well, I apologize for joking about your trauma real quick. Let me just clarify.
It is the funniest fucking thing that has ever happened to me.
Well, we got to hear
But it's also
story.
the weirdest fucking thing. So I was working on Abbot Kinney, like the big bougie shopping street in Venice. We were closing up one night. It was a really weird night closing the cafe. It was like 8 p.m. that we would close. And a homeless guy had come and locked himself in the bathroom, was like chugging NyQuil and passed out. And like we kind of just like let him do his thing in there until we were done. Ended up having to call the cops. Like we got stuck there like way later. It's just me and one other person. And we finally like we get out of there. We're just like, that was just uncomfortable, weird night. He like walks with me like about halfway to my car. He was on a bike, so like we get to a corner. My car's like, I can see my car. And he's like, all right, I'll see you later. I go to my car, and there's a little like piece of paper shoved up in my door handle. I'm like, that's weird. I open my door, get into my car, unfold it, and it says $500 to suck your dick.
Not where I expected the story to go,
Bit
but
of a plot twist.
solid $500.
Right? Like minimal work for me, if we're being honest. It had like one of those Craigslist email addresses on it. And this is actually the second time in my life I had been like solicited, so I was kind of just like, it gets better.
Go for it. Keep going.
So I kind of like brush it off. Like I let my manager know. I was like, hey, this like weird thing happened. Like, just so you're aware in case like something weird happens to me. And nothing happened. Like a month passes, and to the day, I get off of work middle of the afternoon, and I get to my car, and there's a piece of paper on the windshield. And from a distance, I'm like, oh fuck, I got like street sweeping or something. Like I got a parking ticket. I get up there, it's a piece of notebook paper, and it says, "Kick back, get drained, earn $1,000."
I'm just gonna let you continue.
Like some Craigslist talk, like describing like anonymous gay gentleman, something. P.S. Totally digging the BO, and like that was like my breaking point. I was like, okay, this person has clearly been close enough to me while I'm working to like get a whiff. They know my car. It was the like only car on the street with Virginia license plates. And eventually that person did come up to me in the cafe and like said something about like thinking that I was really hot and he liked my long hair. And I was like, all right, I'm out. Like, I can't work here anymore. Get me the fuck out of here. And luckily Blue Bottle had just opened a new location in Malibu, and like I was going up there surfing all the time. Like I knew everybody who worked there. I was like, I'm transferring there, get me the fuck out of here, like this week I'm done. And at that cafe in Malibu, that's where I actually met a music producer, Daily Regular. He found out that I was like into a little bit of illustration. He was like all about working with like emerging musicians, helping them get songs produced and like records out. And every now and then we'll work with like visual artists and like find opportunities to plug them into different people. And so when COVID hit, he gave me a call and was like, hey, I know like cafe's closed for who knows how long. I know you're not doing anything. Like, are you down for some paid gigs? Like I can start plugging you into shit. Like musicians need animation, illustration. Like if you're down to learn some shit, like let's make some stuff happen. And so the first project he plugged me in was with BMG Records for the Allman Betts band. It was like the Allman Brothers kids band. And so the next thing I knew, I was on the phone with Devin Allman and making a music video.
There we go. That's sick.
Because some guy wanted to suck my dick.
Wow. That is, of all the ways I thought this conversation would go, I did not have that on my bingo card. So
surprise.
Yeah.
I actually minted the pictures of both those notes and like just sent them to, I think Scum has one, and I don't remember who got the other one, but I just like blasted those out into the world.
Wow. There we go. There we go. That is equal parts terrifying and funny.
Right?
Yeah.
The verbiage, kick back, get drained. You can't.
That's
that.
funny. That part is funny. Yeah. Stalkers are not funny. We don't like that, but
he crossed the line for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Don't ever be that person. But I'm glad you're okay. And who knows? Has he contacted you recently?
No, I did see him. He came into the Malibu Cafe once while I was working there. Luckily, there was like somebody from the city doing an inspection, and I was like the leader on duty to like take them around the cafe. So like I saw him walk in, I was like, let's go to the back room. And just like dipped out. I was like, we gotta stay back here. I can't go out there until that guy leaves. I'm sorry.
Wow. That is okay. So then you start working on a music video. And so walk me through kind of how did you end up getting into Web3 and NFTs and everything like that? How did it go from, working in a coffee shop, working on this music video to where you're at now?
So kind of at the same time. So this was like mid 2020. Some other artists I had met through some artist residencies that I did, they started hitting me up like, hey, like while you're home, like can't do anything, like you should look into NFTs. Like this is when OpenSea was like just came out, and like if you wanted to mint something, it was like technical jargon hoops that you had to jump through. Like there was no easy code-free way to do this. So it was like a huge lift, but they were like, you should really, like, I'm looking at it, you should look at it kind of thing. And I like tried to look at it, like that shit just did not make sense. Ignored it for a little while, and then like Super Rare, Known Origin, Foundation, like those places kind of started gaining a little more traction, and like those same people came back. They were like, hey, it just got a little bit easier. You just got to like go to apply to these places. It's like curated art marketplaces, like check it out. I was like, all right, I'll check that out. Like kind of found the one with the application process that it was the easiest one, if we're being honest, with Known Origin. Kind of did the application, like kind of sent it through, similar to that first mural project where I was like kind of reluctant, like not really sure what would happen and not sure like how deep or far to go with the application, like what they're even looking for. But I got accepted, and then when it came time to like actually mint a piece, it was so goddamn expensive. Like it was like a transaction fee to like set up your like creator page, a transaction fee to like mint the piece, to list the piece, and like after like $300-400 in the hole, I'm like, I'm never even gonna break even on this. Like this ain't it. And just kind of shelved the whole thing until late 2021. I still kind of like kept up with like coins and like that side of the space, not so much NFTs. But an article popped up about the DAA mint and it being on Solana, and like I hadn't invested in Solana yet, but I'd like kind of like eyeballed it when it was like really cheap, and I was like, I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm gonna pass for now. But like this article comes out and like the whole thing just sounded really intriguing, and like it gave a lot more context about like what Solana was. And so then that was like really my first entry into NFTs. I was like, okay, I'll go see what this Solana thing's about, and like go buy some NFTs and see if I can make some money selling them. And like after a few months of that, that's when I actually like went out and like minted on Holoplex. Like that whole, God bless them, they're doing good shit now, but like their art marketplace was not the most user friendly experience, and like kind of had like another moment of doubt. I was like, I don't know if this is it. Like this is clunky and challenging. I don't know. Then like eventually Exchange Art came out, and that's like I did my first actual drop like of multiple pieces on there, and kind of started finding momentum and traction, meeting people like through that side of the space more so than like entering generative projects and chaotic Discord communities.
What do you think was the biggest like breakthrough moment for you, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of people who are probably listening to this who are like, I want to put out my art, but I don't know how, right? Because even like myself, for example, my background was in photography for 7 years, and I was like, man, I'm sitting on, you know, thousands and thousands of images that I'm very proud of, that I, you know, really love, and things like that, right? And I was like, but, you know, when I first got into the NFT space, my buddies were like, dude, you should take your art and you should put it out as an NFT. And I was like, but why would somebody buy it? Like, they don't know who I am, right? Like, you know, it's like I'm just this random dude buying NFTs, right? Like, they don't know who I am. And now, fast forward, whatever it is, almost 2 years into the space, right? It's like, okay, if I put out my work now, I do feel like there are some people who would support it. But it took me, you know, I had to obviously do the podcast and everything like that to maintain some sort of relevancy to like have people even be interested in that, right? And so I think for people that are like, okay, hey, I'm working on my art, but I don't know, you know, how to gain that social presence that like people are going to be automatically interested in it. So for you, what was your like breakthrough moment that like led to, I guess, like the first like consistent sales per se?
I would say it was the first collection that I put onto Exchange Art. So Holoplex, it was just a single piece, like kind of let me give this a shot just to kind of like learn the process. And then on Exchange Art, I kind of did like I think it was a 3-piece series of illustrations that were DAA, DTP derivatives. So it kind of had like some connection to communities that were already out there. This was kind of like still like bull market vibes going on. So people were like just like excited, money was moving around, everybody was vibing. And I like structured it to 3 auctions all at the same time. And then I think it was every bidder would get like I kind of made like a semi-generative, like drippy ape PFP to give out to all the bidders to try and like encourage some people to show up, and it kind of worked. It wasn't like I didn't make a bag by any means. They were all like 1 soul, 2 soul sales. But I was able to show some of that work at a DAA event here in Los Angeles that same year, and that's like I got to meet like a bunch of people from that community who were there, who were still super active in the space, and like have kind of become friends. Like I've provided guidance here and there, and like we'll share feedback, input. Like I can hit them up and be like, hey, is this dumb? And they'll tell me if it's dumb, and they'll tell me if it's not dumb. To really like, I guess to summarize that, it would be like making something that was like easy for people to identify with, to, you know, get those first connections made before going for like something lofty or heady or that's going to require more thought or attention without really having an audience that's like going to be down for that kind of ride yet.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, okay, so walk me through, like, as an artist, I think, you know, growing up, when I thought of art, I thought of, like, somebody either painting a mural or a canvas or something along those lines, right? And for whatever reason, I never looked at, like, digital art as, like, a thing, I guess. You know, I mean, obviously I'm 30, so, like, digital art wasn't really a thing when I, like, first, I mean, it was, like, growing up, right? We had, like, Microsoft Paint. That was pretty much, like, the, you know, the furthest you could go with it, right? And then it felt like I would say probably when I was around like 18, 19, I started to see like more digital art being created, right? But it was like, I didn't feel like it got at the amount of respect, I guess, that like, because it was just graphic design would be the way they would call it back then, right? It's like, oh, you're a graphic designer, right? And then when I felt like when Beeple first came out as like, I mean, he's been doing this for a long time, but when Beeple first started gaining relevancy, I felt like all of a sudden this whole digital art and one-of-one artists and everything like that started to gain like major traction and things like that. What were your original thoughts on digital art? Because you were doing canvases, right? You were doing murals and everything like that. When did you, I guess, transition into creating like digital pieces, and what were your thoughts on like NFTs in general when like it first kind of was brought up to your attention?
So the digital thing, it goes a lot further back for me. Like in high school, I have an older brother. Like we would get like the like Photoshop trial versions and that kind of shit, and just like tinker around without knowing like at all what we were doing. Like YouTube was nowhere near where it is today for being able to just like find resources to figure out how to do whatever you wanted. So like early high school, I was playing in Photoshop, tinkering around, and like not doing anything meaningful, but like having enough moments of like, oh, that was cool. Like that led to a cool result. And then kind of fast forward into college, like with my major, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, like I was always tinkering in those for classwork. And then outside of class, I was always just like, I'm going to go get stoned and play with Illustrator tonight. That's what I'm going to do. But I never like had like the drawing tablet. It was all like pen tool, shape layers, not really like drawing, which in classes, high school, middle school, college, like I didn't pay attention. I was just drawing in my notebook the whole time. And so it was really like always in the back of my mind, like how am I going to be able to like take that experience of just like drawing with a big pen in a notebook, but bring it to the digital space where I can like find more polish, and like really see through like the ideas that are in my head. Because scribbling with a big pen, I could get results that I was really happy with, but I couldn't always achieve like the colors and some of the like just cleanliness to it. It was always like scribbly, sketchy, black and white. And in college, I tried getting one of the Wacom tablets. It wasn't like the LCD screen one, so it was like you're looking up at a screen while like drawing down here, and like the disconnect just did not click for me at all. And that was like a nail in the coffin until 2020. Those like early music videos, making cartoons, I did not have a tablet. I was drawing pencil and paper, tracing paper down, ink it, scan it into Illustrator.
Wow.
Cut up all the shapes, take those into character animator into After Effects, polish it up, compose everything, export and deliver. I'm glad that I learned it that way. It made me have to be like very thoughtful along the way, but eventually after a few projects, I was like, all right, time to get a Wacom, like actual screen, and see like how that changes my workflow and my sanity. And it was major. That's like really where I feel like I started actually making digital art. It was all just like self-contained. It was like the mechanics, the feel of it was what I was used to. So that really was the pivot moment. And eventually I was like, all right, fuck this Wacom. It's not touchscreen. I bought the wrong one. Let me get an iPad.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like, I guess I never realized until I got into the NFT space, like how important like iPads are now, and like how for artists, like how important they are, and the amount of things that you can do with them and everything like that. It's like, it's super, super cool now to see people have an idea, take it to an iPad, and now be able to do so much with that after it's created. And it really just shows the evolution of the whole art world in general. And so, kind of walk me through, I guess, I think one of the interesting parts about, I guess, like the creative space in general is that the attention economy is a really, really big part of it, right? And when I was 23 or 24 and moved out to LA, it felt like I was working with a lot of music artists at the time, and the attention economy was so important in terms of like, it wasn't just, are you a talented music artist? It was, do you have social media numbers to go alongside that, right? And while that is a very frustrating thing, right, it's also just the way it is now, right? And so there's always kind of that battle of like, do I do something purely out of the enjoyment of the art process, or do I do it because it's going to gain some sort of love on social media, right? And that I guess like thought is kind of counterintuitive, right, to what caused you to create the art to begin with, right? Because people tend to create art because they love it, right? And then now all of a sudden it's like, but am I creating it because I think it's going to do well on social media, or am I doing it because I love it, right? And so I guess for you, how do you take into account the attention economy and kind of having to maintain relevancy while at the same time wanting to strictly be an artist and wanting people to respect you for your art? Like they're almost like counterintuitive things, right? So
100%.
So yeah, walk me through, I guess, like how you, I guess, approach all of that.
So that's kind of what led me into like having like this 101 PFP thing going on, while also trying to make my own art on the side, because like the two definitely, or making like art for the sake of art and like doing your own, like just get lost in the studio and like see what comes out when you pour yourself onto a canvas, digital or otherwise. That stuff's not always going to be algorithm friendly. Typically that type of art is more like requires more thought. You're asking more of a viewer to like sit down, think, be challenged, where through the Twitter interface, like people kind of want to be able to get it quick. They want it to be cool. They want it to be sick. They want to just like flashy, like identify with it like quickly, and to like keep up with the pace of the flow of information on Twitter, where it's a tricky balance. I think I'm lucky being able to like kind of have a foot in both worlds between Nippies and trying to like still keep up with like my own personal work. As far as like getting that personal work to like penetrate into Twitter, like it's a very different battle than, hey, here's a meme that everybody that I'm going to tweet this out to they're going to get the joke, and maybe a couple people might want to buy it. Where, hey, here's this thing that like might be me trying to hold up a mirror to myself and everybody else and challenge us. It's asking a lot on Twitter for people to like actually spend time with that.
Yeah, yeah. The whole process of art in general is a difficult thing, right? Because your goal is to create something that elicits some sort of emotion out of people, right? And enough where they feel some need to interact with it in some way, right? So like a music artist, their goal is to create some form of art where you go, I relate to this in some way and I want to keep listening to this. Or I enjoy this when I'm pre-gaming and I want to listen to it. Or I enjoy this when I'm working out and I want to keep listening to it, right? And then same thing of like the podcast, right? I talked to you before we started this about like my approach towards like making this relevant, not just for people who know who you are, but people who don't know who you are, right? And so there's always this battle of like, I guess, creating something for the sake of the best piece possible, right? Whatever that content piece be. That was a weird way of saying, yeah. But there's always this battle of like, what are you creating it for? And are you doing it to gain the most social attention? Or are you doing it because of just out of pure enjoyment, right? And so, yeah, there's no like right answer to that, right? And I feel like that's something that, when you think about like the music that you listen to or the art that you put on your walls or whatever, right? Like there's something that it speaks to you in some way. And you have to figure out as a creator of that, you have to find a way to create something that once again speaks to that person in some way, right? And so even like I have a Banksy print on my wall over there, right? And like for me, it was the idea of like not knowing who Banksy is and then where he puts his art, and then the one piece of art that he had that was in that was set to auction, and then the moment it sold, it went through a like paper shredder basically, like. That sort of stuff to me just made me appreciate his art so much more. And I was like, yeah, I would love to get to the point in life where I can afford to buy an original piece by him, right? And then when I read about like Beeple's story of like, creating images for like 1,000 days, and he was basically making like $50 a piece. And then all of a sudden it was like he started to gain this social attention, and then he started selling for, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000. Next thing you know, I think his piece went for what, like $69 million? It was something crazy. There was
a lot of zeros.
Yeah, a lot of zeros, right? And so it's always this battle of like, how do you make yourself relevant enough that people are going to take the time to dive into what you're doing, and then also being the best artist possible, right? And it's this, kind of conflicting thing all the time. So how much do you think about that? Do you, I guess, like when you're on Twitter every day, do you have like goals that you want to achieve in terms of like, I want to see these growth metrics because that's going to bring more eyeballs to my work? Or like, I guess, how do you approach all of that?
I don't necessarily have like Twitter goals. Like my account kind of flies under the radar, which I'm pretty thankful for, because between like Nippies just being like raunchy, irreverent, like shit that unfortunately my mother follows me and sees everything that's coming out of that. Like it's stuff that I would never like go home and like say to my parents. But it works really well for just like, I think the culture of the space, like everybody's kind of seems to have like a little bit of a shitty humor and like likes to have like those types of laughs, which is kind of like a good like capture your attention. And then like, I don't know, maybe like a small percentage of the people who like I get their attention that way. It's like, hey, but here's like the more in-depth personal work, like if you want to see like, deeper behind the curtain and what's going on. How that's working, it's kind of like depends on the day and what's happening on Twitter, because like it's because of the space, like something can happen and like all of a sudden the day is just solely focused on that, and like there's no way you're gonna break through that and like shift too many people's attention about anything. But it's challenging. Like I don't know, there's like this tension kind of out there of boutique PFPs, and then you have other artists who are never going to touch that. They're solely focused on making the best art that they can, and the two are kind of having to share this real estate in the space. Well, like both of them are art, like absolutely both, like talent and creative thought and energy is going into both of those different channels. But if you're buying a boutique PFP, it's more like you got community, you've got liquidity, you got like whitelist opportunities. When you're going and buying just standalone pieces of art, you're buying it because it's resonating with you. You feel something, it makes you think, or like does something for you, like what you were just saying about music. So it's very challenging, and just like navigating that tension, especially while kind of having a foot in both worlds. Cause like I don't want to sit here and be like, fuck Nippies right now. Like it's all about art. Like PFPs are the worst. And like a week later after that being like, okay, yeah, like fuck art, like back on PFPs. Like I don't want to be doing like kind of having to like play both sides like that. So I'm kind of in this weird torn between the two sides of that.
Yeah. No,
it's weird.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. So, okay, so let's talk about Nippies for a second. So I feel like, that's kind of how I came across your art. Like I remember when Duppies was first the new project for D-Gods. I remember it was like pretty quickly, I feel like, after the name Duppies was announced, that you guys came out with Nippies. Am I right on that?
It was like same day, but it was never. So I like knew an announcement was coming. I had met Scum in person a little bit before they made that announcement, and he had just like alluded to like, oh yeah, we got something new in the works, but like don't open that folder on my iPad. So like we were all just kind of like waiting for it. Like everybody knew something big was coming. Like we already knew Scum was an insanely talented artist. We knew Candy Apple was like crazy talented artist too. Like they had like all the ingredients to make something wild. And they put out this announcement, but they say, but we're not going to reveal, like no art reveal yet. You'll get that later. And so just as like a shit post, I was like, went onto the Duppies website. There was a little like silhouette of a Yeti, like a little bit of like light branding here and there. That was kind of like furry blue. So I just kind of like drew something real quick, like quick 20-minute little scribbly Yeti thing, just like fired off, and was like jokingly like threatening the team, like I'm going to take like one shitty guess at what you guys are up to until you reveal your art. And like the first one goes, it was like at midnight, they were like running the spaces, kind of giving out some of the first ideas for their direction with the whole project. And then the second one, which is the Nippy that I think everybody identifies Nippies as, like the purpley pink one with like just a tiny little face, tiny little mouth. That's the one that like JB kind of picked it up and just started memeing it, and it just kind of like had a little viral moment that went way further than like any reach that I would have had on my own. And that one kind of like was the turning point where everybody just started talking about the nipples on it. I never drew them initially, like with any focus on the nipples. It was just like, okay, it's like an ape creature, like 2 little nipples, like that's anatomy. But it got like really fucking funny really fast with just like the way people were like making jokes with it, making memes with it. I was down to stick to this like one a day, just like kind of joking about it, like regardless if I was like minting them or selling them. I think it was around the 3rd or 4th day that I actually did that. That's kind of like the art business brain kicked in. And I was like, okay, like where I was at in my art career, I'd like done the DAA derivative series. I had done one personal series. I had like just a small handful of collectors. There was a lot of overlap between the 2 series and who ended up purchasing those. So I was like, well, what if I do like small, affordable, like buy now with these one a day duppy jokes, use that as a way to like expand my collector base, make new friends in the space, meet more people, and kind of like expand this foundation that was like starting to grow beneath me. And they like, I wouldn't announce any of them when I minted them and put them up, and they were still selling within like a couple minutes, like 4 sol, 5 sol, and just kind of like started riding that demand. And that's kind of like how the collection actually came to be a thing on chain. I think after like 12 days is when we like actually made a Twitter group chat. Like it just kind of like all happened so organically and without me like ever saying like, I'm going to go make a PFP project. My goal was to talk shit.
It really is. It goes back to the early part of our conversation where it's just a matter of doing things, right? Like you didn't go into it with a natural idea of like, hey, this is going to be something that people are going to really latch onto the nipples. And all of a sudden it's going to become this thing called Nippies. Now you guys have merch, which actually that's a good time to mention. You brought something for me and I said I got to do a live opening on the podcast
let's
here.
Let's get that ASMR.
So yeah, let's see this. I don't know how easy. You know, we're just going to open this. We're just going to rip this bitch open. Okay, let's see. Okay. Oh, we got stickers.
We got stickers flying.
I dropped one, but here we go. Yeah, we got the Mickey nip. There we go.
Yeah,
there we
classic.
go. The classic. We'll throw up some close-ups on the. Okay. Oh man, let's go. We got the Mickey to Nippy. Oh my God, this is amazing. I can't wait to show this. This is incredible.
Shout out Mickey D Gods.
Shout out to Mickey D Gods. This is truly a work of art right there. Look at those nipples. I mean, no, it's so cool because I remember when I remember seeing that, and I remember just being like, wait, is that actually the collection? Like, I don't really know what's going on, and dude, this is, I mean, it's just, oh my God, the nips as the sprinkles on the ice cream cone, the detail. Let's give a shout out to the detail for a minute. That is a beautiful work of art right there. I'm excited to wear this. Thank you, sir. I appreciate this.
It's the one day the ice cream machine was working.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's the little things like that where you never really know what you're doing and how it's going to lead to something. But if you're like present in the space, it rewards people for being present in the space and paying attention to what's happening, right? Like even like I think the sub DAOs that we've seen that have developed over the last like year and a half, 2 years of the NFT space, it's crazy to see how many of those have become these massive things. And a lot of times it's because somebody finds something interesting about a collection. They like meme it in some way. Next thing you know, all the people that like have that character, you know, that trait of that NFT project are like, we're all memeing it. You know, next thing you know, it becomes this sought after thing, right? And so it is kind of a way to think about, once again, like the art world and everything like that. If you're like paying attention to what's going on and you're creating things as a result of like what inspires you in that moment, or like putting your own unique, funny twist on it or whatever, who knows where it'll go. But like you started something of like, hey, I'm dropping this art until you guys announce the art for Duppies. And then all of a sudden people latch onto it. It becomes this big thing. And you mentioned JB a second ago. For people who, if you're not familiar with JB, if you're not part of DGod's ecosystem and don't know who he is, JB was basically the person who introduced shoeys to the NFT space, I feel like, right? Shoeys have been a thing, before that, but like in terms of the NFT space, JB was the one that was like, DGod's hit, some benchmark, and JB was like, I'm gonna do a shoey, right? I felt like he just came up with a new benchmark every other day to hit just so he could do a shoey. And all of a sudden, I remember first seeing that and being like, this is kind of dumb. That's disgusting. He's drinking beer out of a shoe, right? And I was like, I'm never gonna do that.
I remember that. You hated him
I
for
hated
a long
it.
time.
Not hated him, hated it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I was
yeah.
just like, that's so gross. I'm not doing that. And I also, it was because I was like, I can't chug a beer for shit. So I was like, I hope this doesn't, become a thing, because I'm gonna have to do it at some point, and I really don't want to. And next thing it just, I saw more and more people creating these videos, and JB kept doing it, and I was like, shit, this looks fun, right? And so I eventually did it, and now I actually semi-enjoy doing it. I still can't chug for shit, so every time I put out a video, it's still embarrassing, but like, it goes to show it's the whole power of like, when you don't know how what you're doing is going to lead to, what it could lead to, right? Maybe it doesn't lead to anything. Maybe it leads to this massive thing, right? So I look at like shoeies as an integral part of the growth of DeGods, and some people might be like, okay, there's no way it was it was. It really was. And it's when you have this kind of common bond for people to kind of group together with, that's a very powerful force, right? And so same thing with like, you had this, you were on Twitter, you'd been in the space for a minute, and all of a sudden you see this announcement about Duppies, you decide to put your own twist on it, right? It then starts to maintain this relevancy, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of people memeing it, and now you've got this powerful community of people that are, really, really loyal to your work and loyal to, the whole brand, and now you've got merch that goes along with it, and you see people rocking it on a regular basis, and it's like, it's just really cool to see how these things can develop all from like a singular idea, and without like really knowing where it'll go, you just put out this idea, and next thing you know, it leads to something really cool.
That's like been the theme of my entire relationship with art. Like going back to that first mural, it was like kind of dicked off the application about that. Like somehow that went through, that worked. Being at the right place at the right time, just like still drawing silly shit, like getting me linked up with that music producer. And like Nippies, same thing. It was like just make a little joke with like no planning, no like grand scheme of like where it's gonna go, or no intention about like making it anything more than just that initial like cheap laugh. But being open to following like, and being able to recognize like when the opportunities do start like forming around those things, like the first couple times in your life that happens, like you might miss that wave, or you might get like a little bit of it. And like that had happened in my career so many times, like I kind of felt it forming around Nippies, and like there was that tipping point where I was like, all right, we're fucking running with this. Like I'm having fun. I think everybody around me is having fun. Frank and the boys seemed to like this. Like I got to go meet all of them. They were laughing about it. Like there was no like, it wasn't like me saying like fuck you to them by any means. Like I wanted the people that I'm making fun of to be laughing too, because that makes it more fun for everybody. Like I don't want to be like tearing people down like for my own laughs and them having a shit time with it. And Nippies kind of like checked all the boxes for like, let's pursue this. Like it feels good, it feels right, and we're having fun.
And that's what it's all about. What are we here for if we're not having fun, right? So walk me through the creative process, right? Because I feel like, okay, obviously when you're creating something like Nippies, obviously the creative inspiration is there, right? But when you're just sitting at your iPad, or if you're just, if you're surfing in Malibu or whatever you're doing, kind of walk me through like your inspiration for things. Do you, I guess I'm like, when I think about, the art that I've seen from you, there's always like, I guess, or walk me through, I guess, if you would agree with this. There's always kind of that idea in the back of your head of like, okay, well, if I create something funny, then I can get memed and people will run with it and everything like that. But I'm sure as an artist, you don't always want to have a funny piece. Sometimes you want it to be something more serious, right? So walk me through your creative process in the sense of like, how do you kind of find that balance between like, make something funny that will make people laugh and like get them to meme it, and then it gains relevancy from that, or like, hey, create something that maybe is more serious and has more like it's more personal to you and things like that. Kind of walk me through that whole creative process.
So like that's kind of where there's a little bit of a split. Like I think you were touching on, like with Nippies, it was like kind of directional, like here's a thing that I'm gonna make fun of with something I'm gonna draw. With the more like full illustrations, like scenes that I draw, it's more stream of consciousness. I'll kind of just start drawing shapes and forms and just kind of like following how they're coming together on the paper. Kind of like, have you ever watched like Bob Ross?
Oh yeah.
How he like, okay, while he's painting, he's like looking at like, how's this paint building up on the canvas, and how's that going to determine like, do I put a tree here? Do I put a bush here? Like, okay, this paint's kind of like forming like this, like that's where a cloud's going to go. Like actually like looking what's physically kind of landing in front of you and letting that guide how you're going to develop it. So I don't sit down with like a full formed idea. I sit down and just kind of start making a mess. And then you clean up your mess a little bit, and you start kind of seeing things in your mess, like, oh shit, that's like some eyeballs over here. Okay, here's some mushrooms over here. And when it comes to illustration, it's like kind of you can kind of see in a lot of my illustrations, it's a landscape background, something going on, and like some stuff in the foreground to help kind of frame it in and kind of tie it all together. So like those main elements, like that big like focal point and like the things in the foreground, a lot of that is not planned. It's just kind of like following some forms, and then I form a landscape around it. I did learn to paint by watching Bob Ross, so I think that's why I leaned so much into having natural landscapes. Was also like way into surrealism in high school and college, and a lot of that is like similar compositions of like, here's something going on, natural landscape, maybe some foreground elements. And so that's kind of like the basic formula that I kind of just pour my brain out onto and just kind of follow how things form together and kind of make sense of it after the fact.
What do you do on days where it's just not working, right? Because I feel like that's something that I feel like sometimes we forget when it comes to creators, that like there's days where you just don't have it, right? Like there's days where, I'll say to somebody, if let's say there's somebody who lives in LA or somebody who's in town for several days and we're recording a podcast, there's certain times I've had to say to people, hey, today's not my day. Like today's just, maybe I've got something going on in my personal life. Maybe I was a little hungover that day. Maybe I'm just not feeling too, just there's all kinds of reasons why you may not be feeling it that day, right? Or you put out something and it doesn't get the love that you're expecting, and you're creatively, you're not at your peak, right? You're kind of in the bottom right there. So how do you overcome that? If there's a day where you're not feeling overly creative or you're putting something together and it's just not really clicking, how do you overcome that?
I'm a big fan of like not trying to force it. If shit's not working, like I feel like I've, put in like enough effort to like know like confidently this isn't going anywhere, I'm gonna walk away. I'll go outside, I'll go surf, I'll go make a cup of coffee and sit outside. Like I have to separate myself from it and like just change my surroundings, get into a different space, go for a walk, like do something that's like totally unrelated, because usually that's where like ideas percolate for me. Like if I'm like have like a thought concept for like, okay, this most recent series I'm working on is like kind of me processing a lot of like things I've experienced in the past year. Like I might like have that idea, like the overarching idea come to me, but then when I sit down, like actually pour that out of me, like I don't really know where it's going. So like when I go to like start pouring that shit out, like if it's not working, I got to get away from it and, come back with fresh eyes, fresh hands, whether it's that same day, whether it's a couple days later. I would rather, to the extent that you can while you're, making art to support yourself and making sure you're keeping up with, having enough output to pay the bills, trying to follow the flow of it. And, in my experiences, when I have forced it, like you can tell, like it doesn't look good. It doesn't come out good. It's not like resonating with me, which if it's not resonating with me, like I'm just going to assume it's not going to resonate with other people because I'm not going to like it.
So, okay, another question that I have for you on that is, does competition ever, I guess, like affect the way you view your art? And what I mean by that is like, there are obviously some really, really big names in the space, right? We've got somebody like Beeple who's selling his art for millions of dollars, right? We've got John Lay's art that sells for thousands of dollars. Scum's art sells for thousands of dollars. And to me, I always think about like, would that affect how you view your art, right? Like if you put something up and you're super proud of it, and let's say it sells for X, Y, and Z. What's the most that your art has sold for? Just general question.
100 souls, the biggest sale.
That's amazing. That is incredibly amazing. So, okay, and even use yourself, right? If you put something up for sale and you know, okay, my ceiling so far is 100 soul, right? And let's say something goes for 20 soul, which is still great, right?
Oh, you were real close to the real world situation there.
Really?
The day after the 100 soul sale was a 10 soul sale.
Okay, so yeah, so does that make you, how does that affect the way you view your art? And like, do you feel a natural competition with somebody who's doing really well? Or like, how do you view it where if you put something up for sale and it sells for 50 soul, and then somebody else puts something up for sale that same day and it sells for 300 soul, how do you interpret that? And how do you overcome, I guess, like the pride in you that kind of goes like, damn, I want that, right? Mm-hmm. Which is natural and completely understandable. But how do you view all of that?
Well, I guess for when it comes to somebody else's sales, the analogy that I've got for that is like, I grew up skateboarding, and so like you and your homies, you go out to a street spot, like you're filming, you can't all do the same trick. No, you can't, like 4 or 5 of you all film the same trick on the same spot. So you kind of start pushing each other. Like, okay, you see your buddy do something that was really cool. It's like, okay, I can't do that same thing, but what can I do that's going to like one up that? And like you do that, and it like pushes them. They see that, and they're like, okay, well now they want to come and like one up that. And it's like a healthy competition where, you know, we're not ripping each other off, but we're still inspiring and motivating each other to push further. And so, like in the art space, I think it's like very easy, especially in like the Twitter, Solana, NFT world, to like kind of get lost on that, and like instead of stealing like the model of like how somebody did what they did, like sometimes it feels like people might be like ripping off aesthetics and like how an actual piece is rendered, where what my approach is more, and Scum is again a great example with like everything he did for slimes. Like the rollouts were like he leaned into like every skill that he possesses to create something very special around each one, where it was like a fully designed like poster for it with like video drops, just like fully like thought out every level of everything that he was going to share about this piece. And so for me, I see that not to say that like I don't care about what he drew, but as far as like adopting it for myself, I don't give a shit about what he drew. I give a shit that this dude just like opened my brain to like, holy shit, there are so many levels and layers that I'm not thinking about, and so many skills that I possess that are different, a different skill set that I'm not leaning into. And like, okay, now I turn around to myself, I'm like, okay, like these are my cards, this is what I got, like how do I apply that to the shit that I'm drawing? So for touch grass, are we getting into that now?
We'll get into that in a second. But no, I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. It's like, to me, the way I look at it is like, if I see somebody who I feel like is creating something similar to what I create, right, and it's doing really well, to me, I'm like, man, that moves the bar higher in terms of what we can accomplish, right?
Yes.
So I look at like, okay, if Scum sells something, we'll just keep using Scum as an example here. Love you, Scum.
Sorry, Scum.
But if Scum sells something for, you know, X, Y, and Z, and it reaches this amount of people that see what he created and everything like that, and you know, and then let's say it resells for some crazy amount, whatever, that just raises the bar in terms of what people who are creating art on Solana can achieve, right? Which I think is a beautiful thing, right? Mm-hmm. So if somebody else has a podcast and it gets X amount of views, and you know, let's say it's, you know, 3 times, 4 times higher than what mine is, I'm like, hey, you know what? I want it to be 10 times higher, because that means that the ceiling now is 10 times higher, right? So that's kind of the way I view it. And I think a lot of times we look at things naturally as competition, when in reality it's really not. Like it's people have different you know, styles that they like. People have different you know, we all have different opinions. None of us are if we were all the same, it'd be a very boring world, right? So there might be somebody who looks at your art and goes, hey, I prefer that over Scum's, right? Or somebody who looks at Scum's and goes, hey, I prefer that over his, right? It doesn't make one better than the other. It's all in the eye of the person who is purchasing it, right? And so to me, it's like all it does is raise the bar in terms of how much people value art in the space, which is a beautiful thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the way, it's a mindset change that we have to have. I don't want to ever view other people as competition. I want to view them as people who are collectively working together to raise the bar of what we can achieve. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think when we phrase it that way, and I think that's an overarching lesson that I feel like the NFT space in general needs to learn of like, dude, it's not about, I truly don't care at all who has the number one project. Like, I think that argument is the dumbest like conversation that we have in the space all the time, or who's the number one creator, who's the number one artist, who's the number one, podcaster, whatever. All that shit is dumb. At the end of the day, if there are, on Solana, we have very few projects that are worth more than 100 SOL, right? To me, I'm like, dude, we need to just keep raising the bar in terms of what is normal. I want to get to the point. I hope this time next year we've got 100 projects that have a floor above 100, right? That would mean the space is moving forward. That would mean the space is growing. That means the ceiling is growing, right? So I feel like a lot of times people look at it as like this competition thing, and it's like, dude, we're all in this shit together. We need to grow this thing collectively together, right? So, if there's somebody else's whose podcast is getting 100,000 views, that's great. Let's move the space forward. That means that the bar now is 100,000 views, right? Like, let's get it there. So I think it's just like sometimes changing the way that we think about these things. It's like when you see somebody who's creating something that's very similar to yours, but it's doing, greater volume in terms of sales or, views or whatever, all that means is that you have a higher ceiling of what you can achieve too. So you should be rooting for that. You should be supporting that. And in turn, they'll probably support you too. And that's, I think, one of the beautiful things about the Solana space. It feels like everybody really supports each other. I love that shit.
I fully agree with that. I will say, like, artists, we're sensitive creatures. So, like, absolutely, there's those moments where you see that and it's like, oh, fuck, like, God damn it. But at the same time, like, you can't hold on to that or dwell on that. Like, move past that, like, and like quickly convert that into start thinking like, okay, like, what do I have to do individually with, my resources and skills to like try to stay like at like keep pushing up to that level and or get beyond that level myself even.
Yeah, and I think
it's not easy.
Yeah, no, not at all, not at all.
Very fucking hard.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. Do you have something that you like to do? I guess if you have a day like that where maybe something doesn't sell for the price that you wanted it to, or you see a huge sale come through on somebody else's art and it starts to make you feel down about your own. How do you overcome that?
Usually, like, similar to like if sitting down to draw, like if shit's not working, like I gotta just unplug. Get away from it. If that's like going to the beach, going for a walk. Like, my neighborhood is all like, all the houses have like horses and shit. It's all horse trails and mountains and shit. So like, pretty easy to just like get out into nature and like not even hear the sound of the road by where I live. So it's usually kind of go to those places. I go outside.
There we go. I'm gonna picture you just riding a horse whenever.
I will never ride a horse.
If there's a day you're having a bad day, I'm just gonna picture you riding a horse, just riding through the prairies of wherever there's prairies out here. I'm gonna picture that from now on. Just Scuba Steve on a horse.
No, it's me tiptoeing over massive piles of horse shit because nobody puts a bag on their horse in this neighborhood.
The things you don't think about. Okay, so I want to get into your new collection in a second here, but before we get into that, I want to just know in general, like, how do we move the one-of-one space forward? I feel like there is, when you go onto a lot of the marketplaces, a lot of them focus on the big collections, the 10K collections and things like that. And I feel like sometimes there's it takes a second for people to actually go and educate themselves on the incredible one-of-one artists that we have in this space. So what do you feel like the marketplaces could be doing differently to maybe make it where the one-of-one artists start to get more love in the space? Because I feel like that's a necessary thing to, without artists, the NFT space doesn't even matter, right? Mm-hmm. So you guys play such an integral role, and I think it's so important to shine light on all of the one-of-one artists that we have. Is there anything that you would like to see, whether from, OpenSea or Magic Eden or Blur or Tensor or one of these different marketplaces? Is there something you would like to see them do to kind of help the one-of-one space?
As far like the major marketplaces?
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to see them do to kind of, because I feel like when I think about one-of-one art, a lot of times I think about these marketplaces that are not for the 10K collections, right? They specifically focus on one-of-one art. But I'm like, why is it that we can't go on to Tensor or Magic Eden or OpenSea and buy your one-of-one art? I believe on OpenSea we can. But why is it that like one-of-one art is not on Magic Eden?
I just, it's not a level playing field for capturing attention or any of that. Like 10K collections, you have huge communities, shit ton of liquidity compared to an individual artist. So if you start putting those side by side, like there's a lot of risk, I think, for buyers to become focused more on like the flip aspect of it and less on if like buying shit that they actually like. So I kind of I like that divide that we have.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, I didn't think about that.
Like I did like Nippies recently went on to Magic Eden, but that also was because BitNips was on there, so it was like might as well like kind of have all of them in one place if you know people want to list over there. But they're also still like in their home on Exchange Art, who I've got to like Exchange Art has really created like they're really I think the only marketplace right now for one-of-one art on Solana. And like they've done a lot of incredible work, opened a lot of doors, like made a lot of shit possible for artists that I think a lot of us, myself included, didn't think was possible. But also like because they seem to have like not much competition, I feel like it's also our responsibility to be very critical of them and hold them accountable and be just vocal about, you know, what directions we want to see them go and like what things we want to see change that, you know, at the end of the day, they're making money off of our sales. Like we need to be working together to make this, you know, the best situation for everybody who's working on that side of the space. And kind of circling back to like where we were talking earlier about that tension between like the one-on-one PFPs and like standalone art. I don't really have a good term for like differentiating the two that's like feels respectful to both groups yet. So like I'm not trying to throw shade at either one. Like again, I have a foot in both worlds. I feel like creating some sort of like different buckets in their platform would be beneficial so that like someone like Douglas, who just made this incredible collection of like sculptural basketball hoops, it's like you would expect to go to like some like super high-end gallery in Brooklyn and find this work at. It doesn't feel right to see that next to a PFP collection, like that next to Nippies. Like no, that's not right. Like the focus and like who's looking for each one of those, like they're not the same person. So I think finding a way to tastefully make that division, is division a bad word to say these days?
No, I feel like in the context of this, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make it like, because right now everything's just like thrown together. So it's like super limited real estate and kind of just like a jumbled clusterfuck. And when it comes to like, okay, if I want to make like super personal, vulnerable art, I don't really want to see that next to like a profile boutique PFP collection that's like backed by a team, like essentially a money printer for if you buy this, because you're also going to get like whitelists and this and that you can just like turn into essentially getting your initial investment back just for buying this thing, where my like individual pieces of art, like there's nothing additional attached to it beyond like what I poured out of myself into this piece of art.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's something that like I feel like I didn't really think about the different types of buyers, right? That yes, there are a lot of people who buy 10K collections because they're looking for a quick flip, but like you don't really want somebody to buy your art for a quick flip. Am I right on that?
I mean, if they're paying royalties, like do whatever the fuck you want.
True.
But it doesn't feel good if like somebody buys a piece of your art and then is like starts hitting you up and like asking for like, what does this do for me? Like I bought your illustration. Like, what do I get?
Yeah. That would feel cheap.
You got the illustration.
Yeah.
I worked really hard on that. Like I put a lot of like thought, effort, blood, sweat, and tears into that. That's what you got with that.
Yeah.
Well, you want extra shit? Go buy, get a Nippy. There's a community. There's all sorts of shit happening over there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so one last question on all of this before we dive into your new collection here. Or your new pieces. God, I struggle with the terminology on some of these things.
Same.
Collection pieces, whatever we want to call it.
Whatever the fuck you want.
So have you done yet, and pardon my ignorance here, but have you done anything yet where somebody buys a piece of your digital collection and they get a physical collection or a physical piece with that? Is that something that you've looked into? Have you done that? Walk me through that.
I got a couple versions of that. It's happened. I've made one sale of, it was a 18 by 24 Bic pen drawing, like this again, like kind of surrealist landscape situation. Bought the NFT, you get the art rolled up, shipped off to you. I have a few pieces listed right now for, they come with like canvases that I've painted, pretty similar stuff, landscape painting. One of them's like a hot dog in like a majestic like desert meets forest landscape kind of thing. It's tricky to do with that because it's like, okay, I've got this like 3 foot by 2 foot canvas, and like finding a way to like price that where I'm not going to get like totally wrecked on the shipping if like somebody in Australia buys it. Like I don't want them to buy it and then be like, oh, sorry, I can't send this to you.
Yeah.
So it's like a kind of moving target. So they're all kind of like priced high, and like I would rather like somebody hit me up and like have a conversation. Like we'll find a price that like works for, you know, the art itself and making sure I can ship it while still like making money on it. Like I don't want to hit a break even or take a loss about it.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then with Nippies, we just got to work with Cupcake Protocol on our 1 year birthday merch. So they've got like a little print in them with a little sticker that has an NFT of an edition of that print, and then a couple others have a little something special in there.
Oh, that's very cool.
Claynosaur, a little Mickey D. God's fries. You can steak for dust. Just a couple little extra treats. A couple 101s for Nippies.
There we go. There we go. I like this. I like this. I like the creativeness of like what you can do with the space. Like that to me is my favorite part of like what I see people doing is like you're pushing the envelope of like what you can achieve with art in the space, and like that to me is very, very cool. So with that, let's talk about your new pieces, new collection, however we want to word
the
this. The new shit. So let's talk about the new shit. So what do you have coming?
So it's the collection series, whatever, is called Touchgrass. It is I think it's 12 illustrations total, maybe 13. There will be 11 of them like actually go up for sale. But really it was a 6-month project that I started in December, this past December. Really just trying to like stop for a minute and unpack everything that happened prior to that this past year, which is like FTX crashing, like all the way back to like the Nippies incident where this thing just kind of like that was supposed to be a joke just absolutely took over my life, and you know, like made a lot of money, was able to like do a lot for the community. I never really like in the moment like processed that and realized that like this thing got like way bigger than myself. Beyond that, like in my like freelance side of things, I kind of got like broken up with by text message from a mentor who was also like, you know, giving me a lot of that Web 2 freelance work that I was getting. So after like years of working together, just getting a text message like, hey, like you're off retainer. There's like a lot of like shit like that where it was like really high highs and really low lows that I just had to figure out for myself. And I poured that into all of these illustrations. And my goal was to like take a slightly different approach with like how I was bringing them out into the space. Like typically the norm is, you know, you'll do like weekly auctions. A lot of people are making art week by week with those auctions. So you're kind of getting like the live market feedback as you're going and getting like these outside feedback for better or worse. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to just like hole up in my studio and just fucking go after it without any outside influence of like, oh, well, that one didn't sell well, so maybe I should like pivot this direction, or like, oh, this one sold really well, let me like double down on that. Like I didn't want to have any of that shit going on. I just needed to like really just pour my heart and soul out and figure some shit out by drawing. And it came together as this like very personal collection that's very focused on like my relationship with like social media, technology, the whole weird space that we're living in. It was a weird and therapeutic time.
There we go, man. No, I love that. I love that. I think that's one of the more beautiful parts about art is you can express how you feel in a lot of different ways, right? So I think it's the reason why I love art so much. It's like there's so many different, you know, emotions that art can elicit. And then as somebody who's creating the art, you know, you get to you get to put all your feelings and your emotions and what you've gone through, and you get to put that out there, and somebody else may interpret that art completely different than how you meant it. But like, that's the beautiful thing about art, right? And so, I'm super excited to see that, and to hopefully be able to purchase. Give me some prices. What are we working with?
So there's no auctions with this. I built from the ground up. I coded my entire own website to present the work, because I wanted to just like, with work this personal, I didn't want it to be sharing real estate. I wanted like the digital version of like feeling like I had my own kind of gallery moment with this stuff. So I hired the devs at DegenPix. They've been working on the Web3 side. I built out the entire front end. All the sales will go directly through this site. 100% of the revenue to the artist, minus what I owe for dev costs. And then the sales, I tried to get like a good spread. It's kind of a mix of, like, if you were to get it printed, like, you could go pretty big poster size down to like probably still decent size, but like digitally like quite a bit smaller, more like not quite a PFP. Like, they're got like typography and shit integrated into it. But we got a price spread of 20 sol to 69 sol.
There we go. Nice.
Cultured.
Dude, I love to see that. When's it dropping?
Still got to get the time dialed in, but it should be going live on the 31st.
There we go. AK, so it's already live. It's live, because by the time this podcast comes out, yeah,
it should be live right now.
It's live right now. And then drop the link. Where can people find it?
touchgrass.scubasteveart.com.
There we go.
If you can't spell those,
it'll be in the description of this. Yeah, it'll be in the description of this video anyway. But dude, that's super exciting, and once again, it's just cool to kind of see, the person who's creating this art, and your reasoning for creating it, and all the different emotions that you've gone through, and then being able to put that into your art, and that's my favorite part about art, is just kind of getting to hear the backstory of why you created it, and why it's special to you, and then somebody else is going to buy it, and it's going to have some sort of special meaning to them that may be very different. But that's the beautiful thing about art. We can interpret it in our own way, and it's what makes it special. So
that's, you think you finish a piece, and then you put it out there, and the world's going to make of it what they're going to make of it, regardless of what you think about it.
100%.
And so I make it selfishly, and then once I have that selfish moment, then it doesn't belong to me anymore.
There we go. So, okay, so one last question for you. How do you, when people think of your art, what do you want them to think of?
Oh, that's a tricky one, because I got this like dual thing going. Like, when people hear Scuba, I want them to be able to think of Scuba as an individual independent artist, separate from, like, I don't need Nippies attached to me. Nippies doesn't need Scuba attached to it. Like, I want both of them to be able to stand separately on their own.
100%. I couldn't tell if you were going somewhere further with that.
I couldn't tell either.
Yeah. Okay, actually, let me rephrase that question. So what do you want people to know of you as an artist, I guess? Like, is there, because each one of these pieces has different kind of, different vibes to them, different kind of emotions that are elicited from them, and everything like that. As an artist, when people think of Scuba Steve, what do you want them to think of?
Okay. I think I follow you better now. Like, I want that, like, when they think of me as an artist, like, I'm more than a brand. Like, I'm not like a brand on social media. You kind of got to, like, pick a niche, pick a lane or whatever, and like double, triple down on that. And like, that is your voice. That is who you are. That's not who human beings are, and artists are human beings. Like, Scuba is a complex, nuanced individual. Sometimes I like to make dick jokes. Sometimes we got to get dark and serious. Meet me where I'm at. I'll meet you where you're at. Don't expect like what you would expect from me all the time.
Bang. There we go. Yeah, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Trip over those words.
Yeah, no, but it's like, yeah, you should allow an artist to be who they are, and just accept it for what it is. And so, I feel like that's something everybody needs to understand, especially for music artists, right? Because there's times that they create something and it's this vibe, and then the next album is so different, and people are like, oh God, that's so different. And they may not like it, right? And it's like, but at the end of the day, you got to let that artist just be them, right? And you got to appreciate that it's their creation, and it meant something to them when they created it, right? Which doesn't mean you're gonna love everything that they come out with, but you don't have to love everything they come out with, right? Because maybe one thing speaks to you and the other doesn't, and that's okay. But you got to just let that artist be them, and that's the beautiful thing about it, is that an artist is going to keep putting out art, and you get to appreciate it in your own way.
We got time for a quick anecdote about
100%.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
So like once Touch Grass kind of reached a point where like I started like showing a couple people here and there that like trusted people, like, hey, like I think I'm ready to like start showing this to people. One person, I'm not going to name names, even though it was a positive experience, like it could be misconstrued. Like kind of did the screen share, showed them all the work, like same kind of thought process explanation that we just went through. And he like took it all in, and he asked me if I thought, if somebody sees this work outside of the context of me, do I think that they'll be able to like recognize that I'm the one who made it? And like in the moment I was a little like shook by that. I was like, oh fuck, like I don't know if they will, like is that a bad thing? But like the more I've sat with that, the more I don't want them to, like, if somebody just sees this work out there, my name's nowhere around it, like I don't really care if it like is easily identifiable as me, because that means like I've grown artistically. I'm not like serving up a stale bread shit sandwich of like the same regurgitated shit that is my brand. I'm pushing forward. I'm getting into new territory. I'm getting weird, uncomfortable, and trying new shit. And that means things are going to look different. And that's progress, in my opinion.
100%. 100%. Okay, so I have an idea actually off that, because that was actually something that I was thinking about, and that was a question I wrote and I forgot to ask it. So that actually this works perfectly. Is I feel like when it comes to 10K collections, it's very obvious when somebody has a PFP, you can almost always figure out what it is, right? But when it comes to one-of-one art, whether somebody posts that one-of-one art or whether they make it their PFP or whatever, sometimes it is difficult to know who is that, who created that, everything like that, right? So what if you had a aspect of your website where it was Scuba Steve, whatever your website is, right? And it's all of your work is on there, and people can click each one and go to where it's sold at, right? So if somebody if they go on there and they see Nippies, they see Touching Grass, they see one of your other pieces, and then they could click the piece, and maybe it has even a little brief summary of, the inspiration for it, and, yada, yada, whatever details you want to put. And then it also has, you can click it and it'll take you exactly to where somebody could buy it. And so maybe somebody just becomes a huge fan of Scuba Steve from Nippies, and they're like, well, I want to dive into more of his art. So they go onto your website, and now they find all these different pieces that they didn't know were from you, right?
Kind of like aggregate everything that I've minted.
100%. And then maybe somebody has where they're a huge fan of Touching Grass, and they go to your website and they see, oh, wow, he's got all these other pieces that are super cool and they resonate with me. Cool. And now I know exactly where to buy it. Boom, click it. It takes me exactly to where I can buy it at. Thoughts?
I've got like three steps behind like reaching that on my portfolio site. Touchgrass is on there, Nippies is on there, and it's not like a full view of all the individual pieces, but it does link out to the collection pages where they're available on secondary. But I like your idea a lot more. It's a lot more thorough and comprehensive.
That could be something too, where maybe you even have some sort of like business card with a QR code, and somebody can scan it. Boom, it takes them directly to all your work right then and there. So if you're at an NFT event and you meet somebody and they want to see more of your art, boom, you got that business card. You hand it to them. It's got the QR code. Bang, takes them right to all your work.
Well, that's where we need Exchange Art to serve up that API. Plug that into my website so you can just like do all the transacting directly in that interface, but like it's getting routed through their shit.
There we go.
So it's safe.
Yep. So
I'm not rugging you. Where like with Touchgrass, I know it's like a big ask and like uncomfortable, because it's like we hate links to like go. Okay, this like artist who's never made a website before is like asking us to go there and transact with it. It's like a big ask, and I'm asking for a lot of trust in that. Where being able to be like attached to a marketplace but create my own interfaces would be like game changing.
Yeah. Well, hey, Exchange Art. There it is. There's a suggestion for you. Open up your API, let people mess around with it.
or any marketplace.
True.
I'm not here to be picking and choosing. I want to be able to give people options and like to transact safely, but I also want full control over how much it's being displayed and viewed. And like Touch Grass, I feel like was a big first step in that direction.
There we go. All right, dude. So to wrap this up, one last question or one last thing. Is there anything you want people to know about Scuba Steve? If they've watched this entire interview, what do you want them to know about Scuba Steve?
I did not take up that creepy dude on his offers in the notes. I could be $1,500 cheaper and 2 more blowjobs under my belt, but here we are. Touch Grass coming out on, it's already out if you're watching this.
Yep.
We're got some cool things in the works for Nippies. I don't want to spill too much alpha on that, but if you're familiar with D points, it might be a little similar to that.
Okay.
And I haven't drawn in a while. I've been in like press tour mode, so I need to just, get to the other side of this, and I want to get back to just, wake up, coffee, surf, draw my brains out. That's my rhythm. There's too much Twitter in my life right now. I want to get away.
What about you as a person? Give me one thing that people, if they may not know, if they, let's say they haven't met you personally, they've just seen you on Twitter, whatever. What's one thing that people should know about Scuba Steve as a person?
As a person. Man, that's such a fucking hard question.
I know. I'm putting you on the spot.
One thing.
I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm pretty lactose intolerant.
Of all the things to say there. Anything else?
I feel like I'm like really under delivering on this.
No. You can take that wherever you want. I wasn't sure if there'd be a drop the mic moment, or whatever. Or hey, if you're very lactose intolerant.
Not very. Like I can eat a little bit of cheese. I might get a little farty about it. We don't need to like get too deep into that. Fuck, I'm kind of drawing up. I don't have like a big like.
No random fun fact about Scuba Steve.
Yeah, no fuck yous to drop. No.
Oh, here. Actually, I'll leave it with this. Where did the name Scuba Steve come from? Outside of is it the obvious?
It is the obvious.
Like the Adam Sandler movie?
And yes, Adam Sandler movie. I was in middle school. My older brother when I was in middle school, he was in high school. So him and his buddies would like start drinking in the garage, smoking pot in the garage. And like they would come like wake me up like midnight, 1 a.m. like, come down, come hang out with us. And like I wasn't like, they wouldn't let me like drink or smoke with them, but they wanted me to be there around it. And so they started calling me Scuba Steve. I had 1 year of overlap with my brother in high school. I ended up having all the same teachers he had. So he had all of them know like, hey, my brother Scuba's coming through. So I'd have like teachers who would like see my last name. It's a recognizable last name. They're like, Scuba. And when my brother got me my first job at a surf shop, he was like, there's already, I think, 2 Stevens who work there. So just to like make the schedule easier to scan, and it was like, all right, well, we'll call this one Scuba. So I've been on numerous payrolls as Scuba. Like I have that first crosswalk intersection, it got rebuilt as like brick pavers in the road that I got to design. And each corner there's a brick like intersection art by Scuba Steve like engraved in there. My parents call me it. My grandparents like.
Damn.
When I say Scuba's not a brand, it's who I am. Like.
That's facts.
It goes deep.
That's facts. He's Scuba Steve. He's very lactose intolerant.
Not very. And moderately.
I thought you said very.
I didn't say very. I think I said pretty.
Pretty. Okay. He's Scuba Steve. He's pretty lactose intolerant, and no, he won't let you give him a blowjob for $500.
Well, so the current offer is $1,000.
$1,000. Okay, so.
And we're trending upwards.
Yeah, so
this is a bullish chart.
So 1,500 might be in play. We don't know. So if you drop him a note in his Phantom wallet, maybe he'll take you up on it.
Are you gonna buy the dip?
With that said, dude, this has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to come on today. Didn't think we'd be talking about some of the things that we talked about, but we did, and it's what makes you special. So I appreciate you, Steve, and I'm pumped to rock this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And dude, everybody, go support Touching Grass. Go support the rest of your work. Go support all the incredible people who are behind Nippies. And yeah, once again, go touch grass and support art. Support one of one artists. artists. And if you're buying one-of-one art, talk about it. Let people see it. You know, that's important. Let's shine light on all the
questions.
incredible.
Hit up an artist and say like, hey, this is what this is doing for me. Like how you're interpreting it. Like fucking talk about it. Have the conversations. Get deep. I guarantee you an artist isn't gonna like be mad that you want to share how you're interpreting art and like get into the conversation about it. Like speaking for myself, I'd be fucking pumped.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, I mean, that's the cool part about the space. Again, it's like you can buy something from somebody and then talk to them right afterwards. Like, there's not many other aspects of life where you can literally buy something and then talk to the person who created it. So,
yeah, IRL art, like, that's not a fucking thing.
Yeah, or anything. I mean, clothing, music, like, there's very few times that you can literally buy something from the person who created it and then immediately talk to them afterwards. So, that's one of the cool aspects of this space. Take advantage of that. Hit up Steve, have a conversation with him, talk to him, you know, drop him an offer for $1,500 or, you know,
zero.
Just don't offer him cheese, okay? Whatever you do. No cheese. All
Cheesy
right?
blowjobs?
Oh, good Lord. All right, we're wrapping it.
It's over.
We are done. Thank you, guys. Cuddles is going to meme that. You already know he's going to clip that.
I hope so.
It's going to happen. But, man, appreciate you taking the time to chat today.
Absolutely.
And
thank you so much for having me. Like, this was... I know you're super busy. Like, making the time for this means a lot. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all, dude. So appreciate it, and we'll have another conversation soon, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Hell yeah.
See you guys.
Cheesy blowjobs.
See you guys.